Alright, we're going to finally finish the Roger Coleman story. In part 2, we left off with Roger Coleman being arrested on April 13th, 1981. The grand jury had returned an indictment for rape and capital murder. He'd been arrested and was held with no bond. So we'll pick up on April 14th, 1981, when Roger was arraigned. He informed the judge, Nicholas Pearson, that he could not afford an attorney, and none of the criminal defense attorneys in the area wanted the case. And the judge did not push them to accept it, nor did he assign it to any of them. Instead, he chose an attorney, Terry Jordan from Grundy and Stephen Airy from Tazewell. Now, neither of these attorneys had experience in criminal trials, nor had they ever tried a murder case. But these were the attorneys that Judge Pearson appointed on April 16th. Initially, Trish Thompson Coleman, Roger's wife and Wanda's sister, supported her husband. But as the year went by, before the case came to trial, she changed her mind, and she stopped supporting him. So the trial began on March 15th, 1982. This was 1 year and 1 day after Wanda had been buried. Now, the defense had asked for a change of venue, but it was denied. And they also asked to sever the rape and murder charges. This was also denied. Now, as far as the change of venue, I don't know why it would have been denied. The case was very well known, and there were very strong opinions in the area about it. And in my opinion, I just don't think that anyone with Roger's reputation and the charges and the things that had been said, I mean, it was just the talk of the town. I think change of venue should have been granted. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a judge. It's not my decision. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so the defense was inexperienced, and they were definitely unprepared to try a case of this magnitude, and the prosecution was just the opposite. But the defense did manage to score a few points. One being that the fingerprint found on the front door of the McCoy home did not match Roger Coleman. Also, when Dr. McDonald examined Wanda's body, he rolled her over, which could have caused the pubic hair to be deposited on her. And they were also able to show that the black substance found on Wanda was not coal dust, but actually soil. Problems were that the couple Roger picked up his 8-track tape from said that it happened around 10:30 p.m. And even though Roger's friend, who stopped on the road to talk, said that that occurred at 10:30, they could not prove it. Also, Roger's wife initially told investigators that Roger had returned home that night at 11:05. And she knew the time because she had been in bed reading when he got home, and she looked at the clock. But at the trial, she denied knowing what time Roger had returned home. So the state called their first witness, and he was a criminal, Roger Matney. He had been in the Buchanan County Jail with Coleman. Matney testified that Coleman had confessed to him that Coleman and another man had been at the McCoy residence at 9 p.m. when Bragg called and spoke to Wanda, and that after the phone call, the other man had attacked Wanda with the knife, and then they both raped her. Matney claimed Coleman had drawn them a diagram of the house. However, they did not produce one. The defense brought out that Matney had been sentenced to 4 years, but was out in less than a year in exchange for his testimony. What the defense did not know at the time was that the sentence reduction was given even though Matney had been charged while in jail for beating and threatening to kill another fellow inmate while forcing him to perform a sex act. And that even the investigation did not really believe Matney's testimony. On March 18th, 1982, Roger Coleman took the stand to testify on his own behalf. He remained cool, calm, and collected as he recounted the details. He denied having anything to do with the rape and murder of Wanda, and he denied Matney's account of the incident. Coleman said that when he recounted details of the case that he learned from his wife and other family members, and he was asked to explain how the drops of type O blood was found on his jeans, he really had no explanation. He said only that his cat could have scratched someone at some point and caused blood to get on his pants. After Roger's testimony, the case went to the jury at 6:01 p.m. on March 18th. They deliberated until 8:15 p.m. They broke for dinner until 9:35 p.m. And then at 10:50 p.m., they announced that they had a verdict. They found Roger guilty of both rape and murder. For the rape charge, he received life in prison. The murder charge was a capital charge, and a separate hearing would be needed to decide the sentence. The next day, March 19th, 1982, against defense objections, Brenda Rife was called as a witness to tell the jury about the encounter with her and her daughter 5 years earlier. At 2:33 p.m., the jury retired to deliberate. At 6:17 p.m., they returned a verdict of death. In Virginia, the presiding judge of a criminal trial has the right to review a death sentence and affirm it, review it, or substitute a life sentence. Judge Pearson had never sentenced anyone to death, and he was opposed to capital punishment. Later, he admitted that he was surprised by the jury's verdict because he did not think that the prosecution's case had met the absolute certainty requirement that was necessary to impose a death sentence. But on April 23rd, 1982, Pearson told the packed courtroom that he could find no legal reason to overturn the jury's recommendation, and he sentenced Roger Coleman to death. While he announced the sentence, tears were running down his face. In September of 1983, the Virginia Supreme Court rejected the direct appeal filed by Jordan and Erie, and his conviction and death sentence was reaffirmed. In 1984, the United States Supreme Court also denied his appeal. On April 4th, 1986, his petition for a writ of habeas corpus was denied because it was filed 1 day late. This late filing also prevented him from entering any other appeals in the state court. On April 26, 1988, Coleman filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus in the United States District Court for the Western District of Virginia. The court ruled against all 11 of his claims and denied the petition. The United States Court of Appeal for the 4th District affirmed the decision in 1990. Sorry, the dog's crazy. The court did grant Coleman's petition for permission to have DNA testing performed on evidence from the crime scene. On November 7th, 1990, results from the DNA testing, which was done in California, were returned. They failed to eliminate Coleman as the suspect. However, 3 alleles, I don't know how you say that, alleles, were identified in the sperm sample, indicating 2 separate donors. On September 24th, 1991, Coleman's petition for a rehearing was denied. On October 14th, 1991, Coleman's attorneys filed his second state habeas corpus petition in the Circuit Court of Buchanan County. In addition, they filed motions for discovery and a request for an evidentiary hearing based on new evidence. The Commonwealth filed a motion to dismiss, and on December 14th, the Commonwealth's motion was granted. At this point, running out of legal options and Coleman's execution becoming less likely to be prevented, Coleman's attorney and friends began going to the press to stress Roger's innocence. His attorneys had named a viable suspect, the next-door neighbor of Brad and Wanda, with a history of violence against women. But the Commonwealth was prepared to execute him anyway. Roger Coleman was scheduled to be executed on May 20th, 1992, unless another court or the governor intervened. On March 31st, 1992, the first national story about Roger Coleman appeared in Newsweek magazine, declaring him innocent of the crimes he was convicted of. The Washington Post, the New York Times, the New Republic all wrote articles on the case that were favorable to Coleman. On April 7th, 1992, it was determined that the extra allele from the DNA test did not appear to come from Brad McCoy and matched his account that he and Wanda, did appear to come from Brad McCoy and matched his account that he and Wanda had sexual relations a day or two prior to the murder. On April 24th, 1992, Coleman's attorney filed his petition for writ of habeas corpus, along with a motion to stay his execution pending a final decision on the petition. On May 1st, 1992, Coleman was moved from the Mecklenburg Penitentiary to Greensville Penitentiary in a death watch cell only steps from the electric chair. Time magazine sent a writer and photographer to Greensville to interview and photograph Coleman. The issue of Time with Roger Coleman on the cover hit newsstands on May 11th. On May 12th, Coleman's final petition for writ of habeas corpus was denied. On May 14th, a press conference was held in Richmond that included a phone line allowing Coleman to participate. That night, via a remote feed, Coleman appeared on Larry King Live. He was calm and he was articulate. By May 15th, the governor's office was flooded with mail and phone calls begging for clemency for Coleman. Even Pope John Paul II and Mother Teresa made public pleas. International media outlets turned up not only in Richmond, but even in the small, remote town of Grundy. On Monday, May 18th, Wanda's family organized a memorial service for Wanda. At 10 a.m., Coleman's lawyers were informed that Governor Wild would not grant Coleman clemency. After weeks of back-and-forth arguments, Coleman was allowed to take a lie detector test, but Governor Wilder would only allow it if it was administered by Virginia State Police and on the day of Coleman's execution date. On May 19th, they removed all of the guards that had been working with Coleman, replacing them with strangers. Then on May 20th, around 6 a.m., Coleman was taken to Richmond for the lie detector test. After arriving, they were told that his attorneys could not be present. While being hooked up, Roger broke down in tears of frustration. Around noon, it was announced that he had failed the test. He had his last meal around 6 p.m., shared with his attorneys. He had Tombstone pizza, Sprite, and fudge stick cookies. At 9 p.m., his head was shaved, and he was changed into his execution clothes. Around 11 p.m., he was strapped into the electric chair. Asked for any final words, Coleman said, "An innocent man is going to be murdered tonight. When my innocence is proven, I hope Americans will realize the injustice of the death penalty as all other civilized countries have. My last words are for the woman I love. Love is eternal. My love for you will last forever. I love you, Sharon." The mask was then placed over Coleman's head and the switch was thrown. Coleman was pronounced dead 5 minutes later. He was 33 years old and had spent the last 10 on death row. Brad McCoy and his brother made the trip to Greensville, the only members of Wanda's family who went. They were not allowed into the death chamber to witness the execution. Coleman's body was cremated following the execution, and he asked that his ashes be scattered in the mountains around Grundy. As his ashes were scattered, Amazing Grace, performed on bagpipes, was played. In 1998, a book was published by John C. Tucker called May God Have Mercy. It was written to show Coleman's innocence. To this day, it is not allowed to be checked out of the Buchanan County Library. It's a very good book. I've read it. Beginning in 2000, attempts were made to have post-execution DNA testing allowed. It continued to be denied until January 5th, 2006. A week later, Governor Warner announced that the lab in Toronto had found that Roger Coleman's DNA matched the semen recovered from Wanda McCoy's body. There are those who still believe that Coleman could yet be innocent. Some feel that based on local rumors, Coleman could have been engaged in an affair with McCoy, which could explain the presence of his semen. But there's no proof of that. The only proof available is the DNA testing, and that's what we have to go by. I don't necessarily agree with the death penalty in most cases. I think there are rare cases when it is justified. At the time of Roger Coleman's execution, I think there was enough question that he should not have been executed. Obviously, it turned out that legally he was guilty, and the sentence was just, I guess. But at the time of execution, I think that there was enough question that it should not have happened. I don't know what lesson we take away from this case, but I guess it's just good to know. And that is the end of Roger Coleman. So have a good day, everyone. See you next time.